That's right, this build right here has almost every goblin in the game, and I'm gonna win with it. Can't be that hard, right? But before we get into that, a word from our sponsor, Opera GX. It's the browser for gamers, so let's get into why. I don't know about you, but I always have a million browsers open when I'm playing games. But Opera GX is built with this situation in mind, and it works to make sure that your gaming performance is not affected by whatever is going on in the browser. You have GX control to shut down tabs which are using too much CPU or RAM, and options to limit network, RAM, and CPU usage. And the network limiter can be very useful if you're worried about the amount of bandwidth that Google Chrome might take up, ensuring your browser has no impact on whatever game you're playing. And in addition, the sidebar can basically have any social media channels you'd want to access. So that's Messenger, TikTok, Discord, and Twitch all together. And also, you can keep your favorite music streaming services like Spotify, YouTube Music, or Apple Music on the sidebar as well. The music automatically pauses when you start a video in a tab, and automatically restarts once the video ends, so you don't have to manually pause your music. And guess what? It's also on mobile, which can be connected to the desktop version. Great for getting all the same benefits if you play on your phone. So go ahead and give it a try. Opera GX is free, and you can download it using the link in the description below. But alright, getting into the match, we got a skirmisher core, a front line of normal goblins, some archers, and a mix of a lot of artillery. Grom has brought for himself a good old lucky banner only, just to make sure that he's nice and tanky. We have a Night Goblin Shaman, who's going to be quite powerful today. He has Gorkle Fix It, and that's going to be just a nice utility to shut down any mobility of the Skaven. As for my initial summon, I'm going to be bringing in Night Goblin Fanatics, and we're going to be trying to maximize the value on my various goblin units here today. Now for the archers, the difference between Night Goblin archers and normal archers is pretty small, so they're basically the same unit, and it's generally the same idea for normal Night Goblins and goblins. Really, the big difference is with the Fanatics, who should be fairly good against basically any infantry. Now, for the range tools, basically my main goal is to soften them up with my artillery, maybe get them to rout with Grom, and hopefully just distract them as long as possible without taking too much damage. And as a starter, we're just going to send Grom directly in there before they can get too many shots off, get some Fanatics on the clan rats, and already we're doing pretty good damage to the front line. Now, obviously my melee front is not especially powerful, but thankfully today, as we are facing against Skaven, they should actually trade fairly evenly. I just gotta make sure I get some solid charges and avoid those nasty Globadier shots. Over in the middle though, they actually do friendly fire their own units a little bit, which keeps my Night Goblins fighting a little bit longer, though it looks like they will be routing off. And as for Grom, he's basically indestructible in the backline. He doesn't care at all, and he's gonna be essentially my strongest holding unit in the entire battle, as most of my goblins not exactly the best at holding here today. As for my Fanatics, we're just going to be sending them onto the right flank, and for the middle we do get a nasty engagement with our mobility. I sent Squig Hoppers just right in here, more of a sacrificial unit if anything, just to shut down their range as much as I can. And for the Forest Goblin Spider Riders, we're just using them to chase off some wolf rats, just to give myself a little bit more mobility advantage. I also remember, finally, to send in my skirmishers, who are going to be poking down the units in the middle, just so that they can eventually capture that point, and it's just going to be a lot of mobility. Now, sort of fun unit over here, the Moon Howlers, almost a unit you never see, Wolf Riders with Fear, which make them pretty nice in this very specific situation. I wouldn't generally recommend them because they're quite terrible in melee, but for routing off ranged, they're pretty good. And especially since the Skaven were already on the verge of routing, not too bad. And that's just enough to get my front line a little bit of an advantage, especially with those Fanatics again just destroying the infantry. And also another cute unit, the Goblin Wolf Chariots. Not especially strong when compared to Squig Hoppers, but they do live quite a bit longer. So as you can see in the middle, the Squig Hoppers, they are already on the verge of routing, but I would expect the Chariots, just due to their slightly higher armor, and higher entity count to stick around in the fight a lot longer. And that's going to be very important here for, well, against a range build. You really want them to be just occupying them as long as possible, just so that Grom can get the work done. And speaking of getting work done, the Goblin Big Boss, one of the best, or one of the better cheap assassin units in the game, he's going to be trying to snipe out the general here, trying to take out that Grey Seer, and so far it's working pretty well. Although he is knocking him down a lot, so generally not a lot of damage being dealt. But at least it's going to be canceling his spell casting for a little bit. And eventually I do expect to snipe him out. Middle point gets taken with the good old skirmishers and their fairly high capture weight. And over here on point number 3, we do get some nasty skulkers to shut down the clan rats. Now the nasty skulkers are great because of their slow ability. You can use this either to slow down routing units, or you can use it to pin down cavalry to make sure that they don't cycle charge. In this case, not really the best situation for nasty skulkers, but a nice tech piece if some wolf rats do ever get engaged. And over in the middle, we're just holding down the point. You know, he has a couple globadiers, but as long as I keep away from them, I should be fine. And of course I can send in Grom there too. But situation's a little bit sketchy. Over here on the left point, my opponent is starting to capture point number 1, but am I really very afraid of that? Not really. I feel like I do have a fairly solid lead now, with sort of all points starting to get captured, and of course that mighty 5,000 gold lead. As it turns out, Goblins actually not too bad if you can actually make use of their mobility. I'm not going to say they're better than Greenskins, who are just a complete battering ram of a unit, but I think this sort of shows that you can sort of make it work. Just be wary that there's definitely no synergy for bringing in an only goblin army. And of course, there are still avenues, strangely enough, for my opponent to come back. He actually gets a bunch of rat ogres charging onto my goblin archers. His range too can be quite terrifying. If they even fire for a little bit, they can very quickly get back their value. And he's also taken the high ground. And I'm going to have to try and steal that back from him. And look at that. Rattling Gunner's just going ham on Grom. He actually takes about a third of his HP and damage just to that single unit. Really shows that we do have to be a little bit careful here. There's also a second unit of Jezzails in the back that I have to very much worry about. And with all of the summons from the Grey Seers, I'm probably gonna start running out of front line here. Goblins definitely not known for their front line. Another summon too, just some more clan rats. Gonna be trying to steal that point. And it's gonna be a little bit sketchy given that I have mostly range right now. Especially with those rat ogres on the right flank. I even have to desummon my artillery just to make sure that they don't get shut down. But thankfully for me, it seems like the rat ogres will be going down, as just without infantry support, the nasty skulkers should be able to run them down. Of course, they also have their slows too, which would make it very hard for these guys to disengage. So really, I just have to worry about the middle. And there we go, the slow does actually drop. And what can we do here? You know, I do have the Warlords boys. They do have decent stats, so they will be able to stop these guys from capturing immediately. Of course, I have the skirmishers who could also rotate on the point, but it's a little bit dangerous. As soon as these guys are out, I don't have anyone that can really hold on this point until I bring in a few summons. And also, I gotta say, the rat ogres, despite nearly routing off, they just barely hold, and they're gonna be causing a few problems here. Tying up my infantry for a very long time. These guys not the best fighters in the world, and without routing them off, my opponent could potentially pull a comeback. He's recaptured 2 points, still, surprisingly enough, 5,000 points behind. I don't know how things are so even considering that. But regardless, he continues to hold. We rout off a single rat ogre, but the other one continues to pummel us. And it seems like I will be able to hold the right side. Now, what can I do about this center position, though? He has a whole bunch of clan rats. There's a whole bunch of night runners. And basically my play, just go for the full surround, essentially. Get every single cavalry unit to try and rout them off. And we do get a decent amount of damage here. We do also throw down a slow. Or no, my opponent actually uses Bless with Filth to give poison to these guys. And then I throw down the slow to try and just straight up debuff him. But Nasty Dreaded 13th spell does drop. Storm Vermin Halberds gets a load of damage. I was not expecting that when I decided to blob up. But thankfully, we don't take too much damage from it. I do have to disengage though. And it does run the risk of my opponent capturing the point. But most of these guys are summons. I believe actually all except for 2 of them are going to be summons here. So that means that we'd still manage to hold the capture point with my hero, Grom, and I guess just the chariot. A little bit of a sketchy situation. I'm probably going to have to wait for those guys to time out. As for the right flank, still holding. I wouldn't expect my guys to go down to a single unit of clan rats. And for the left point, we finally retake the point. I honestly, no idea why it was so close, or why it feels so close despite having almost a double value lead on top of my opponent. But I guess just a dreaded 13th spell is truly dreaded. Just a whack load of damage, and against my primarily mobile based army, it was pretty scary. But they do finally disintegrate, and just like that, things are looking pretty well in my favor once again. Just a single unit of clan rats, a single unit of Ixcha's triads, and we are contesting with our nasty squig hoppers with their crazy anti-infantry, and a few units of infantry, and most importantly, Grom the Paunch, still at about half HP with a decent amount of regeneration to go. He can sort of cycle charge here, and just like that, with the crumbling of the summons, we suddenly get a triple cap. And at this point, the game's basically over. Not too much else to go over. I still have a very strong value lead, and my opponent's sort of on his last legs. I can summon whatever I'd like, and I even have the Hammer of Gork with its nasty debuff to really secure this blob in the middle. So we'll just ×4 through the rest of the game. Not too much battle, not too much combat really to go over. You know, my opponent sends a few more summons, but that's gonna be it. GG! And just like that, the Greenskins, or more specifically the Goblins, take the victory. Overall, an interesting build, Definitely not something I would recommend you bring to ladder unless you really like goblins, but it sort of shows that they have enough tools to deal with even like a fairly standard Skaven build. You know, you got the archers for the rat ogres, you have Grom for the weapon teams, and then you have a good enough front line to fight against clan rats, and, you know, fanatics to shut down all of those nasty storm vermin. But there we go, challenge completed. We did it. And hopefully the next challenge, well, hopefully the next challenge is just as fun. I honestly had a great time with this build.